Two-time Pushcart winner, Lisa Taddeo has written for New York Magazine, Elle, Glamour, and many other publications. Her nonfiction work has been included in Best American Political Writing, Best American Sports Writing. Her fiction has been published in McSweeney's, Granta, New England Review, Esquire, among others. Her debut nonfiction book is Three Women, and it is about desire and sexuality in America. She's a former resident of West Tisbury, now lives in Connecticut. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
How many have read the book already? Okay. Well, in for a treat when you pick that up. So you focus on three women here, but tell us a little bit about the process. You interviewed, and you started with men. So let's start with why you've shifted the focus to women.
Well, I started with men and women, but I thought I was going to be more interested in men just because it was the opposite gender, and I thought that I would just naturally be drawn to that, especially since I'd been writing for Esquire and men's magazines. I just felt I was going to be drawn to that. But as I talked to more and more women, I found that the complexity of female desire was not necessarily deeper, but they were more willing to share, and they had more to say in many ways. And so, yes, I decided it was going to be women. After speaking to hundreds of people, I zeroed in on about 20.
So you had about 20, and you asked them lots and lots of questions, and they get really, really detailed with you. Did all of those 20 or 25 get that detailed with you?
Yes. Well, no, not as detailed as the three that I chose, which is one of the reasons that I chose them, was that in a way they chose me by giving me as much access. And I had driven across the country by that point 6 times, posting up flyers and trying to canvass the country in a way that I could get the largest swath of people. But in the end, I moved into Indiana. That was the first thing I did. I started a discussion group where there were a number of women who were doing these hormone treatments and becoming newly thinner in their bodies, but their husbands were still not as interested in them. And the woman that was the first woman who showed me what I wanted was this woman who walked into the discussion group and told me that her husband no longer wanted to kiss her on the mouth and that the very sensation offended him. And they went to a couples therapist, and the couples therapist said, well, that's okay. The way that your husband feels about kissing you on the mouth is the way that you feel about wet wool.
Yikes.
Yeah,
that's so you have Lina, the Indiana housewife, who's in this loveless marriage. You have Sloane, the entrepreneur, who is in an open marriage, and Maggie, the young lady from North Dakota, who had a relationship with her high school teacher. So these women are very different. Did you find them reluctant at all to share their stories, or was it really important to them to tell you all of this?
It was more telling than reluctant, specifically with Lina, who at the same time that she was coming to terms with the death of her marriage, was also reconnecting with her high school boyfriend with whom she had always been monumentally obsessed. And they were meeting each other at this spot called the River, where they used to meet when they were young kids. And for her, it was the way that you feel about any new love, she felt about this man, and she wanted to shout it from the rooftops, but she was married and very from a traditional family, and divorce was not something that was okay. And so she wanted to talk to somebody, and I wanted to listen. And so I would go with her to the river, or I would hang back while she was meeting the man there. And then she would come out of there and tell me literally everything that had just transpired, note for note.
Wow. That's intense. Now, Lina, she put a time frame on this. She said, okay, if my husband doesn't touch me in 3 months, that's it. I'm done.
Yes. So, and the 3 months, that deadline was so powerful. And I was talking to her during this time. I had begun talking to her during the start of the 3-month deadline. And so I watched it. She said, if he doesn't touch me, I'm leaving. And she literally told him the day that it came to the 30-month mark that she was gone. And so that was so powerful to me. And people have said that Lina has no agency, because this man, the high school boyfriend, would contact her and say, I'm 4 hours away from you. And she had 2 children, but she would pull babysitters out of a hat and drive to go meet him. And, the judgment is either she had kids, she shouldn't have done that, or she was going wherever this man wanted her to go. But the way that I saw it, and the way that I think a lot of people can see it, is that she had been raped as a young woman, and then her body had been abandoned for a decade, and now she was finally reconnecting with the person she might have been if she hadn't been raped. Right. And it was so important to her. She was finding herself in all of these sexual moments, and so to talk about them was not really licentious, but vital.
Yeah. I took away when I read Lina's story that she was discovering a passion that she had never experienced before. She had not had this type of sex before, and she was obsessed with him, as you mentioned. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then we have Sloane, who's got the open marriage. Tell us a little bit about Sloane.
So Sloan, I had met. I'd moved into Newport, Rhode Island, because I'd been talking to several people who I had found through flyers. The flyers, I hung up these flyers literally across the country in nearly every state except for Wisconsin, Hawaii, and Alaska. And I would hang them up in salons and in bathrooms. I really liked bathrooms because nobody could watch me doing it, because it was embarrassing to go up to someone and say, "Can I hang my sign?" Mainly because the signs were embarrassing.
And what the sign says. So tell us what the sign said.
So it said "unrequited love?" ? Do you have a powerful and compelling story of desire? And then I had I had an email address that was not my real one, because there were a lot of sex addicts writing to me and saying, "Yeah, I've got some stories." So, and I didn't want that. And but the signs, it was not so much that they said something silly. They all said different things, because I was trying to find multiple people with different stories. It was more that they were very silly looking, and they were black and red and white, kind of like the cover of my book. But I don't think my book is silly looking. But it was this little bear holding a rose that was kind of one of the things you could choose from at Staples. So it's just seeing that, and actually we were doing this like mini documentary at my house about the process of the book. And they were asking me if I had the signs, and I said, "No, I have no signs. I don't know where they are." And then my husband came and walked downstairs into the basement and brought them up. And so now the signs have been unearthed, and I'm never gonna. The humiliation is gigantic.
All right, and these 3 women you did not find from those posters.
Correct.
Right? So
correct.
Back to Sloane.
Sloane, I heard. So after moving into Newport, I heard 2 rumors. The one was that she had an open marriage. Her husband liked to watch her with other men. The second, that was more shocking to hear, was that her husband liked to have sex with her every day, and not only did she allow it, but she enjoyed it. And so I remember saying to the person, I was like, "Well, that's not that bad. That seems
like a bad thing.
That seems okay." And she said, "It's disgusting." And so that like the other aspect was not, but this one was. And so, but for me, what I saw was a very happy marriage, perhaps one of the happiest I came across in the hundreds of people I spoke to. And so it became for me with Sloane, with each of the women, almost more about the judgment around them from their community than, while their stories were wildly compelling, so too was the judgment of predominantly other women.
Yeah. And then there's Maggie. Tell us a little bit about Maggie.
So with Maggie, she's a young woman in Fargo, North Dakota. I had been in North Dakota researching a different story, and I read in a local newspaper about this young woman who had just come forward and brought charges against her former English teacher, with whom she'd alleged an affair, a consensual affair, but nevertheless one that happened when she was 16 and 17. And what he had just been named North Dakota's Teacher of the Year. And the trial went in the way that this was pre-Me Too, and as most of my book was researched and written prior to it. So it went the way that one would imagine the trial would have gone pre-Me Too. And so I drove to Fargo the next day, and I told her I wanted to talk to her.
Yeah. And she really, talk about feeling unheard. Talk a little bit about that relationship. This was the one I think that really kind of made me feel bad because of her age, and she was clearly manipulated. She really thought that there was a future, and you can see this as a 16-year-old girl. She's believing all these things that he's saying, and the Twilight book
So
and the notes.
the Twilight book was the most shocking thing to me. Twilight is the story of a vampire and his human lover, and in this book, she had given it to him. She wanted him to read it, and he had in turn given her Pablo Neruda poems, and he had put Post-it notes like a teacher on 50 pages of the book, and the Post-it notes said things like, "Is this like you and me?" And just as I thought, age does not matter, and I can't wait till you're 18. ... So there were these many 50 at least notes, and the jury did not. Well, the handwriting expert said that basically it said it could be him. It certainly was not Maggie. And what was so shocking about it was that nobody, even if they believed it was his writing, because I talked to people off the record, they still didn't. They were like, oh, it doesn't mean something happened. Mm-hmm. There were hundreds of hours of phone calls after 11 at midnight. And as I've said before, my mother told me that nothing good happens after midnight. And, that's how I felt about what was going on. There's just no way that you're talking to a young woman about her problems after midnight. You would tell her parents, you would tell a counselor, and nobody was really looking at that. Yeah. So,
and one of the heartbreaking things, this teacher's name is Aaron, and his wife is Marie. Marie finds out, she sees a text, and Aaron tells Marie the woman he was having an affair with was nothing, nobody, a blip. Maggie's not even somebody whom somebody hates. She is a nobody whom nobody knows. Talk about crushing.
So yeah, I think that I think with that sort of that's it, the day that it happened, he said, "That's it. I can never talk to you again." And it's one thing to be broken up with a young man your own age, but to be broken up with an authority figure that you have to continue going to his class in order to graduate was one of the most heart-wrenching things. And when it came to that text message his wife allegedly found, the fact that she was, it was just, then I also think about how the wife must have felt. There was just so much going on with that text message.
Yeah. Talk about Sloane a little bit more. We know she has an open marriage, but she is very much a perfectionist. And this kind of, all three of them have impacts from their mothers. And that was something you discovered in a lot of people you talked to. So talk a little bit about what made Sloane such a perfectionist.
Well, I think that her mother had put her in, she had to go to riding school and ballet and every sort of sports activity and every kind of other activity she would do to the utmost. And if she didn't, it's not that her mother wouldn't love her, but she might have thought that she wouldn't. And what happened with her is she began to think that she couldn't be the best horseback rider. She couldn't be the best violinist. She couldn't be the best at all these different things, but she could be the thinnest. And that was something she could control. And so she became anorexic and bulimic. And that, what I found with all of the women, what I found with my own story is that the weight of the mother is so great and heavy, and that affects how much we give credence to our own desires later in life.
Yeah. And you talked about judgment, and you write in the book, often the type of waiting women. Lina waited a lot for what was his name again? Aiden, yeah. Often the type of waiting women do is to make sure other women approve so that they may also approve of themselves. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty heavy statement, right?
Yeah, but I think I found that with literally everyone I spoke to had some aspect of that had happened in their lives. And with these three, it was really a thread that bound them. And the women in their lives anyway were either jealous of them for things that they could not do, or jealous of them because or they were projecting their own shame onto the women. It was fear based, but yes, the way that I think women fear more the opinions of other women than men, almost 80% of the time.
Yeah. What about male readers? You've had some male readers come up to you and say, "Whoa, that was so eye-opening to me." What is it that you're hearing from male readers, and what is it that you're hoping male readers take away?
The first thing that I heard a male reader say was that until he read my book, he didn't know how indifference could be so wounding. And that was very important to me because it was certainly something that I think Lina would have wanted Aiden to know, her high school lover. And for me, that is a takeaway that's important because I think that it's not just men, it's whoever has the quote unquote power in a relationship, the notion that they would just for weeks sometimes Aiden would not text Lina back. And then when he was ready to, he would say, "I'm here 4 hours away, come meet me." And when she saw him again, she would say, "Why didn't you write to me? I wrote, you could have just sent me one word back and I would have been happy just to know that I still existed in the world in your eyes." So I think that level of indifference, I would hope that anyone who has emotional power in a relationship, whether it's intimate or even career based, to just kind of to just accept, to just tell somebody that I see you.
And that judgment, it isn't just women. It can be men too. That judgment that it's sort of guys seem to get a bigger pass. If they're sowing their wild oats, or however we look at men in some of these situations, and we look at women in these situations very differently. Do you think your book, and maybe the fact, I know the Me Too stories are a little bit different because most of the people, they're victims, but do you feel like this is starting a conversation that has us looking more at that?
I would like that. With Me Too, I think that we're talking about what we don't want as women, and I think that what I was focusing on with my book is talking about what we do want, and to hopefully minimize the judgment that happens when women tell each other what they want.
All right, let's talk about, since you mentioned power, there was another powerful statement I thought in the book, and this was with Sloane and her husband, and they have a threesome with someone they work with. And she is believing that his wife, who they also know, knows about this, and she doesn't. She finds out that Sloane has slept with her husband, and she's not too happy about this. And she says, they have this conversation, and she says, "You're the woman. You're the one with the power and the control."
That was one of the most striking things to me because I felt that that was such a, I had not thought that until that was told to me. I think that it's such a powerful statement, and it's so true. It's true if you believe it to be true. And it's like, it was just, yeah, that to me was one of that was one of the lines that I couldn't get out of my head, and it still gives me the chills to hear it.
Yeah. All right, so anybody who's read this knows this reads like a novel. I mean, you can't put it down. So I want to know how you did that. I mean, were you thinking it? Were you trying to? I mean, obviously, it's compelling, and you want to know what happens. And
well, I mean, I don't read nonfiction that much. I only read nonfiction by writers that I admire. So Tracy Kidder and Tom Wolfe when he was writing nonfiction, and he went to fiction predominantly. But Joan Didion, Janet Malcolm, I don't read about subjects in nonfiction that I am interested in. I'll just read by the author. So for me, it was important to write in a way that was not boring, the way that some nonfiction can be boring. And I wanted to do that. So I would ask the women questions from hundreds of different angles to be able to tell them in a prismatic way that did not feel rote.
And you mentioned you would go to the river where Lina would go after, and you would sit there and kind of take in the smells and the sounds. And so you really could bring us to those places and in those moments.
Yes, I would go there directly after. I would sit there. And then after I would do that, and I would figure out that it smelled like X and the river sounded like Y. And then I would say to Lina, "What did the river smell like to you?" And she would tell me, and it was really, I was able to weave those things together in a way that I wanted the reader to experience the same thing she had.
I asked you this question in another event we did. Somebody had asked me, did she have to be so graphic with the detail?
She wanted to be, and the reason she wanted to be is because, much like we write diaries when we're children, you want to record everything that's happened to you, especially if it's great. She had never been touched in this way either. She had only been raped and not touched at all. She had never been touched in a way that made her feel like a human being, and so all of the details of that, all of the things that added up to make her feel like the person she felt with him. She had fibromyalgia and uterine disorders and all these things that she had not been able to cure with medicine or with exercise. And she said that when I'm with this man, I feel no pain. And so that to dissect all of the physicality of it, that was what she was finding herself in, the minutia of those moments. So I do think they're important.
Talk a little bit about what happened to Maggie, because we go through this, she goes through this trial, and as you can imagine how devastated she is that no one's hearing her or believing her. But she found some heroes in some unlikely places since the book has come out.
Yes. So Maggie's story, I am thrilled because Maggie has said that the book has given her closure. And that has been one of the most important things that I could have heard. And so women have been writing to her from all over the world telling her that she's helped them and saved them. And then the biggest thing is that Maggie's hero has always been Abby Wambach. She had posters of her up in her wall when she was a kid playing soccer, and Abby Wambach posted a picture on Instagram of her reading the book, and I said to her, "You're Maggie's hero," and she said publicly for everyone to see, "Maggie's my hero." And Maggie just, she can't stop thinking or talking about that, and it's just it's a really great byproduct.
Talk a little bit about your writing process.
With this book, I would take notes and tape record, and then in the evening I would transcribe the notes and transcribe the tape recording, and then I would typically write the stories from the transcriptions with the previous person I had been with while I was finding the new person or hanging out with the new person.
This book has gone, as you know, viral. People are talking about you've been in a million interviews. People are talking about this like crazy. What is that? You weren't expecting that. This book has really taken off much more than you anticipated. So talk about what that's like.
It's shock. I thought I was writing a quiet book, and I think a lot of people did. I did spend almost a decade on it, but I also didn't. It's not like I thought because I spent that much time that it was going to reap the rewards of that time. I thought that much time was going to make it into a book that I would be proud of. So while the attention it's been getting makes me happy, it's also it kind of exists on a different plane. I'm also an incredibly anxious person, so I would prefer to be behind the scenes writing and not being seen at all. Like some people want to be seen. I don't want to be seen. But yes, but
overwhelming.
Yes, yeah. I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah. What about the women in the book? What do they think about it?
With Maggie, it's been wonderful. With the other two, I think that there's. I certainly don't want them to be discovered in their communities. Newport is a small town, and so is where Lina's from in Indiana. So I hope that it's fine. They like their stories.
How about questions from the audience? Anybody want to come up to the microphone and have a question? Yeah, come on up. Can you come up to the microphone so that we can hear it? So everybody can hear your question. That would be great.
Hi.
A little bit closer. Right into the mic, yeah.
No.
Okay, we hear you. Okay.
I'm speaking. There we go. That's disorienting. Can you discuss how people have understood your book to be a description of female desire? My personal experience was that it was still male desire that was affecting women, and in the three cases in a negative way.
I don't think that it was about. It's not about male desire. It's about these women were finding themselves very much so, specifically Lina and Sloane were finding themselves. The fact that there was a man present in it, I don't think is the point. I think that the man was sort of the shape of the hole in the woman's heart that she was going after, but all three of the women have realized that it was not that, but that's the conduit by which their stories were told, because that's the way that it happened. But I don't think it's about male desire, and I think it's about the fact is these women were talking about what they wanted, whether it was a man or to be loved by their mothers. They were talking about what they wanted, and the notion that judgment still exists about what they want is kind of the point of the book, you know?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and some people, you've actually had some people who have had sort of a negative thought on these women, which is not the point.
Yes,
at all.
it's the exact opposite of the point. So what the thing about the women are, they're incredibly brave. They told these stories. They were raw stories. And the reason they're being judged, if they are, is because they're telling the truth. And that's the very thing that I saw. And when people don't judge and do the opposite, which is say, oh my God, which I've gotten hundreds of letters and notes saying thank you. And then Maggie has gotten double that, saying thank you. And that to me is a mark of the fact that we are having trouble talking about what we like because we are judged for it.
And I think there are someone who see themselves in these stories, right? And I love when you tell the story of Sloane who read 50 Shades of Grey and went, "Oh, I feel normal."
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's, for each of these women there's a feeling of being normalized by whether it's a new love or a book. With Lina, it was The Princess Bride. With Sloane, it was 50 Shades of Grey. With The Princess Bride, Lina felt like, oh, I'm allowed to have a big love story. Like, it's not just that because I'm from here and because I come from a mother who doesn't think I need to be happy, that thinks I should just work and be with my kids at all times. To have that sort of that feeling that you're allowed to do what you want as a human being in the world is magical. And with Maggie, it was with Twilight. The fact that Twilight was weaponized against her is horrifying. But the fact that she still had this experience, and the nuance of that is what I found interesting, that while she was having this experience with this teacher, she was happy, and she has learned about herself. And then what happened? And then it became awful. And the ups and downs of that are part of human existence. And to ignore one side of it is a one-sided way of looking at it, obviously.
Other questions? Anybody want to come up to the microphone? Oh, yeah. Hi.
Has the North Dakota teacher been found out?
Oh, well, his name is in there.
I know. What happened to him?
I know that more books have been sold in Fargo than almost anywhere else. I don't know. I've tried to talk to him multiple times. Towards the end of the book being ready to be published, I faxed his lawyer. I don't know what's happening. All I know is that people are reading it out there. I don't know what's happening in his personal life, but yeah.
That was another powerful point in the book when one of Maggie's friends, Maggie, she was getting the tattoo. Tell that story about when she's getting the tattoo.
So Maggie decides at a certain point she feels like she needs to get over this. It's been years. She has gained all this weight and lost all this weight and dropped out of school several times. And she's depressed, and she's waking up at noon and just wearing fake fingernails so she doesn't pull her eyelashes out. So all these awful things had happened, and she goes to get a tattoo, a Harry Potter tattoo, because that became her new thing because she could no longer love Twilight. And she gets this tattoo, and it's being given to her by an acquaintance. And she tells the story to this acquaintance. It's like, she's like, this is the last time I'm going to tell my story. She already hadn't told it that much, but she was like, I'm going to tell it one more time. And the acquaintance said to her, if he did it to you, he's either done it before or he's going to do it again. And so for Maggie, that was it, much like Sloane was liberated by 50 Shades of Grey. Maggie was liberated by this woman, her friend, saying, you were a victim, and for years she had been feeling like she had done something wrong or that she wasn't a victim because she had welcomed it. And the notion that when he started texting her when she was in Colorado with her family, he would say things like, I can't talk to you anymore. I can't talk. And she never broached, and she never said, why can't you talk to me? Because she was always afraid of crossing a line because he was her teacher. And so that's just that is such a strange, the fact that she didn't know until this friend told her, and then her therapist that she began seeing said the same thing. So it was confirmed, what the thing that she did not realize.
Other questions? Anybody else want to come up to the mic? Yeah, come on up.
Hello. Hi. Good.
I haven't read the book. It is on order. It arrives tomorrow. That's okay. But one of the things I was curious to find out, one, do you identify them all by ages, your women?
Ages?
Yes. Two, do you, in finding your characters, did you consider cultural diversity, age diversity, or were you looking more for their experiences? And three, from the information you're getting, do you think the book's content or message is crossing cultural divides and age divides? ABC.
So, okay, wait.
First, ages. Do you tell their ages?
So I do tell their ages. I had, in terms of ages, I had women of
Sound young.
multiple ages. There was the first draft of my book. Actually, the fourth or fifth woman with the largest section after the three that are in there was a 70-year-old woman who was looking for love after being widowed. In terms of cultural diversity, I was looking for that very much in the first draft. Of the first 20, there were 25 people in the first draft. Some of them men, one of them a gay man, one of them, there was just multiple. And we whittled it down first to 10 and then to 5. And what kept happening is these women were the three largest sections won. They were the ones who had given me the most detail. And the fourth and fifth person would sort of pale in comparison. On top of that, I also lost multiple people who no longer wanted to talk to me. And that happened after moving into their towns and spending 6 months talking to them. So yes, I wanted everything. I wanted my proposal said that I was going to have 100 people from all different walks of life, and I ended up with 3 women. They don't stand for all women. They stand for themselves very powerfully, and they gave me more than anybody else gave me because it's scary to do this. I probably wouldn't do this. And the third question was,
Do you have
sorry.
the input or the
Oh,
feedback
yes.
you've gotten? Is it
So-
crossing cultural divides?
Oh,
or
yes,
divides?
completely. And it's funny because it's been completely across everything. There's been a lot of queer women who have said that they felt the same ways as these women did, and it was very enlightening to them. It almost made them feel more sisterly towards their straight friends because they often think that because there's a large sexual divide, it's not as easy to see yourself in other people until my hope with this book was to tell the specificity in such a way. So when you say, was I looking for certain stories, I was only really looking for specificity. Would I have wanted it to be age and culturally more widespread? Absolutely. But in the end, specificity was the most important because I think it's specificity that moves us to empathize.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I thought I saw another hand somewhere. Did somebody else want to come up? No? All right. So I mentioned that this book is getting a lot of press, and now very recently, last week, Showtime is picking this up for a series.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, right? Yeah, and you're going to be doing the adaptation. So is that, are you a little nervous about that? And what are your thoughts?
No, I feel great. No, I'm it's mind-blowingly, I'm very nervous about it. Extraordinarily. But I feel honored, and I'm grateful that I'm excited about it, but I'm probably more petrified than anything else.
Yeah.
Don't tell Showtime.
Yeah, no, we won't. But now, because you've changed the name of 2 of the women,
Yes.
so trying to protect their identity.
Yes, and I'll probably do that more
Yeah,
in the show.
So will there be a bit of fiction to this to try to protect them some more?
Yes, not fiction so much as just changing.
Changing
I don't. The
places.
only fiction. I don't want the fiction in the emotions. So there can be fiction in where different kinds of how many children they have and facts that are usually the most important thing in nonfiction, which they are. But in a show, you have more. There's more license to move that around. And it will be, say, based on, it won't be a direct adaptation. But also, because I had so many hundreds of people, they'll come in, I imagine, in some way.
Yeah. One of the things you when you talked to all those 20, you had like what was it, 900? How many words? You had a lot of material, and that just seems overwhelming to me to
Yes.
have to kind of narrow that down.
Yes.
How did you do that?
I don't know. It took my editor. The first draft I sent him was not 800,000 words, which is what I had. I probably sent him about 400,000 words, and what's in there now is 120,000 words. So he was rather shocked, and we were, we didn't know where to go, and we had to cut out entire stories, and then we cut out entire parts of other people's stories. So there were probably 100,000 more words of each of the women in the book. It was hard.
Yeah, so you have these three women, as you mentioned, who are very brave, and they maybe weren't thinking this book was going to do as well as it has. Now they've got word of Showtime. Are they worried about their communities and them kind of being found out?
We've talked about it. I am hopeful about making as many changes. And the other thing is that the book is out. Nothing that will be done in a show it's all going to be, it'll be differentiated in a way that I will talk to each of them about.
Yeah. Now, somebody asked you the other night at the event we were at if you talked to Aiden or any of the other people. And this is really just the women's story. Obviously, the trial thing was different. You had other information. But as far as Lina and Sloan are concerned, it was just their story.
I talked to other people around them. But when it came to somebody like Aiden, if I had talked to Aiden, who had no idea that Lina was talking to me, it would have ended their relationship. So the most important goal in talking to any of these women was, one, not to intrude upon their lives, and two, not to change the trajectory of those lives. So if I had talked to Aiden, it would have ended Lina's relationship with Aiden, and then she probably wouldn't have talked to me anymore. So,
So there's a guy in Indiana going, is that me? Are they talking about me? Other questions? Anybody else want to come up and ask a question? Yeah, come on up.
Hi.
Hi.
I am the mother of a 12-year-old daughter, and I am wondering, based on what you're saying about how much of the women's lives and their struggles were reflective of their relationships with their moms, I'm wondering if you were to write a book now about advice to moms about parenting girls, and I also have a 10-year-old boy, so maybe also boys, and preparing them for their lives as sexual adults and amorous adults, what would some of your key takeaways be?
So I have a 4-year-old daughter, so you are already well past what my experience with mothering is. I will say that every minute of the day I consider how I'm screwing her up. What I do hope for her, whatever mode of communication we have in 8 years or whenever she begins to date, maybe 20 years in my case, because I'm just going to make it really hard, I don't want her to ever wait around for the proverbial phone call. So, and that's not just for women. I think that's for men and anyone. I want her to know that whatever person she might like or love, who is perhaps not giving something back to her in the same way, that person is not so much the most amazing person, but perhaps a stand-in for that which she's looking for in herself.
That helpful? You're nodding. Other questions? Anybody else want to come up? All right, well, while somebody's getting there, brave enough to come up and ask their question, I want you to talk. We'll go back to Sloane for a minute, because you talked about people have this assumption that their marriage was not a happy one, and indeed it was. And her husband thinks of her as his goddess.
Well, that's the thing that I think is the most impressive thing about that marriage to me, which is what you just said, that her husband tells her every day, "You are my fantasy." And she knows that, and she knows it's true with her entire soul, that physically and emotionally that he only wants her. And even though there's other things that go on, that to strip that, to just take that one thing, that makes her feel loved in the world in a way that not many people quite feel. I always think about I don't know how true, I think it's fairly true, but Jessica Simpson was on a plane with Nick Lachey, and she watched what's the movie with Rachel McAdams and Ryan Gosling? The Notebook, sorry. So The Notebook, thank you, I meant. So she's watching The Notebook and she says, oh, I can have a love like that. And she filed for divorce when they landed or something that close. So for me, I find that just so interesting that you want to feel that way and you want someone to feel that way about you. And certainly it changes and morphs over the years and it lessens or maybe it heightens. But at the end of the day, that core feeling of being loved in that way, I think that that's what everybody wants. And she still has it a decade longer after they were married.
Right. And a lot of their the other people who were involved in their sex life, he usually was the one choosing, but she could say no.
Yeah, if she had said no, he would have been fine with that. It was that there was an aberration, and that was what was reacted to by the community, the aberration of it, and not the fact that it was happy.
So what are you working on now? You're going to be working on the Showtime thing, but are you working on another book?
Well, my novel's coming out next year, and following that, a collection of stories, and the show, and just I submitted another proposal for a nonfiction book because I don't know why I'm doing it to myself. I just want to be writing for the next couple of years and not getting on planes. And so I just keep throwing things out there that'll keep me behind a computer.
So are you nearing the end of this book tour then?
No.
Still have ways to go. So you still have a few more planes to catch.
Yes,
People
yes,
to talk to.
yes.
What has been the biggest takeaways for you when you do events and you're hearing from people who've read the book? Is it? I'm assuming mostly positive, right?
Yes, and some of it very interesting. The other day in D.C., a man said to me, actually two men basically said the same thing. They came up to the microphone and they said, "Is it okay that I've never given a woman an orgasm?" And I didn't really know what to say. I don't have the answer to that. Is it okay? It's fine, I guess. It's more a question to ask the women. But yes, so the reaction has either been, it's been mostly positive and questions have been incredibly engaged and I love answering them and I've learned new things by people asking them.
So what did you learn? What's the takeaway for you with this book?
That we are all linked. In the hundreds of people I spoke to, there was not one story that I couldn't have seen myself in. And certainly with these three women, because I was able to tell their stories with such specificity, I think that I would hope that everybody would be, literally everyone, would be able to see themselves in one, two, or three of them, not in the window dressing of it, where they're, whether they're married or whether they're 17 or 80. I would hope that some, like Robert Angel, the former editor of the fiction editor of The New Yorker, said that inside we're all 18 years old with red lips. And I think that's the most beautiful thing, and it's so true. And that is what I think unites us all.
So you were very much part of these women's lives, moving to their towns, spending a lot of time with them, and you remain in contact with them. Did you form a friendship with these women that you think will continue?
Yes, I very much hope so. With Maggie, I talk to her daily because she's named and I'm trying to ensure that she feels comfortable at every juncture. And with the other two, yes, that too. It was more my interviewing them, obviously, but I did tell about myself only because it's organic to have a conversation, especially after you've known someone for 2 or 3 years.
Now, we didn't talk about this, but you start the book with a story about your mother. Mm-hmm. So tell us how that came about.
So after speaking to these women and all of the women I spoke to, I began to notice how large the mother was a factor in their lives. And what I learned when I would go into each of these, I would go into my own head and think, wow, we talk so much about daddy issues, but we don't about mommy issues. And I have mommy issues to the max. And so I wanted to talk about my own because she had passed away before I'd gotten a chance to ask her the things that an adult woman could ask her mother. And one of the things that I had heard from her that I didn't really ask more details about because I didn't want to know was that when she was a young woman in Italy in the 1960s, a man used to follow her to work and masturbate in step behind her for multiple days. And I was shocked by that, but she sort of had metabolized it. She didn't tell me this story in a sense of I have been marked by this. She said it with almost humor. And And my brother, I was able to ask him because he's older and he had heard, and he told me the story that he had heard from our aunts and uncles. And it was so shocking to me. And then I thought about how much, not in the same way, but how much I had been done to me in that same feeling of letting it happen.
Any more questions? No? No? Okay. All right. The
Yes.
Sloane husbands know about the book. Yeah.
Yes, I think so. I don't know. Yes, I don't know.
Obviously, he was supportive of Sloane's idea to do it, though. Yeah. All right. Well, Lisa, thank you. It's always great to see you. And
Thank
the book
you.
is fabulous.
Thank
You
you.
should read it. Lisa will be over signing books if you'd like to get your copy.
Thank